we bring you a discussion on cooperation between India and African countries to strengthen the Global South. The participants are Sheelkant Sharma, former diplomat, and Om Vesh Upadhyay, anchor.
Today we will unravel the intricate tapestry of international cooperation. The blossoming collaboration between India and African nations is seen as a testament to India's unwavering commitment to Global South solidarity. And today to talk on this, we are joined by former diplomat Sheelkant Sharma. So, Mr. Sharma, to begin the discussion, I would like to talk on India's emphasis on Global South solidarity and also what role does this collaboration play overall in advancing shared interest on the international stage?
India's entire thrust in foreign policy under the present leadership is comprehensive. It is not just focused on one particular segment or one particular motto. It is comprehensive and it is state-centric. It is driven by state, but it is people-centric. It is driven by political understanding, but it is very much anchored on economy. And for development, Global South is development and sustainable development, SDGs, as the UN has characterized these elements of the sustainable development. In all of these goals, the targets which are there, if we achieve them nationally and together with other countries. So this was the whole concept and visualization of the Global South, which to give shape to that, before the G21 summit in India, we organized a Global South summit. And as you mentioned, 125 countries participated in that. And they shared the perspective that India had for this whole process. And what is that perspective? That perspective is of sustainable development. That perspective is of meeting the current challenges and the challenges which are knocking at our door. These challenges are about climate change, implications, and how to cope with climate change. The requirements and the needs of the Global South in regard to climate change are very different from what the developed world wants them to accept. So India is in the lead, like when the G28 took place in UAE. India is in the lead to say that funding for climate change related development and the changes should come from the north. And the funds which have so far been earmarked are too little. But we require that. Then we had this International Solar Alliance, which is something where the South is rich because the sun showers its bounty on the southern hemisphere or the tropical areas where we have large hours of sun and intense sun. And this is free. This is God's grace to us. And so International Solar Alliance works in that direction so that our countries in the Global South, they are able to tap this energy for their own requirements, for their development, for their nation building. So it's a very important initiative which India has been sustaining now, and more countries support it. And in a sense, in the economic or in the socio-economic field, this initiative has the same importance as it was of non-alignment, which India initiated in the 1960s for decolonization and for disarmament and for the independence of the southern countries of the South. And in this whole perspective, Africa is central. The countries in Africa figure most prominently in each of these indices, be that in education, be that in women's empowerment, be that in skill development. And India's, again, its long-standing program of international technical and educational cooperation, ITEC. In that, the maximum assistance and maximum investment has been done in African countries. Many of them have benefited a lot, and they acknowledge that, yes, we have got people who are now at the helms at times, who have come to India under ITEC. So Africa figures most prominently in this. And the reflection of that was that when G20 summit took place, we made special emphasis on getting Africa represented in G20. And so African Union, which is an important African organization, was now admitted as a member. and they began participation at the summit in Delhi.
Indeed. Yes, Mr. Sharma, you very rightly said that how African Union or African countries are now becoming central in this landscape, and that's why recently we saw Dr. S. Jaishankar, our External Affairs Minister, who visited Nigeria and co-chaired the 6th Joint Commission meeting between India and Nigeria. So for our listeners' benefit, can you please share the key outcomes of the meeting and their significance?
Foreign Minister Jaishankar in Lagos was very eloquent when he mentioned that his whole attempt at the Joint Commission meeting is to spur the relationship beyond the existing very well-established channels. The trade between India and Nigeria is already between $12 to $15 billion, and the Joint Commission meeting decided to further take it forward. The areas and the avenues were identified for work. In the financial sector also, we want to work together. In the digital sector, digital public infrastructure, India wants to come forward and help. And then in the green economy, again, India feels that we could work together. Nigeria is an oil exporting country, it is very rich in oil, but how to move away from that and to sustainable energy. So there, again, investment and bilateral relationship is important. Then on the social sector, on education and on women's empowerment, Mr. Jaishankar outlined these points. So our investment also in Nigeria is $30 billion. And the Indian companies have been engaged in Nigeria for a very long time. The problems being faced by Nigeria are so similar to ours. Like, for instance, you take this example of they have been trying to make a big financial move. In 2022, the then Nigerian president decided to redesign the Nigerian currency, Naira, and some old currency notes were put out of circulation. The problems that they face and the solutions to them, India can guide them. And this is internationally acknowledged because India has dealt with this problem very successfully. So how to start digital transactions and where can they improve it? What about their financial institutions? How will they would support digital transactions and the size and the scale of digital transactions? And this whole process, how we accomplish this. The Aadhaar unique identity number, identification number. These are the kind of basic frameworks which are necessary, or basic infrastructure, digital infrastructure, which is necessary to move forward in the financial field, so that even as developing nations, we can come to a point where financial transaction or day-to-day living doesn't need to depend so much on physical currency, but digitally it can be done as it is done in India.
So Mr. Sharma, if we talk about India's diplomatic strategy towards African countries or African Union, how does it align with its broader vision for more inclusive and equitable global order in the context of multipolar world and global south?
You see, the non-aligned summit in Kampala, in its declaration, was very much influenced by the very gruesome process of Israeli retribution to the Palestinians of the 7th of October attack. And the last 3 months, 25,000 Palestinians dead. So the focus of that summit was on West Asia and on Palestinian rights and two-state solution. But it also ended with emphasis on UN reform. The UN Security Council should play an important role, and its reform is now supported by the non-aligned movement in very effective manner. And this was a decision in Kampala, and the big countries in Africa, they support it. So India shares with them this not only commitment to the multilateralism, but also a desire and a strong emphasis on the need for reform in the multilateral system, be that the trade system, WTO, be that the UN Security Council or the UN development agencies. They all should gear towards making the needs of the global south in the coming decades. And their needs are different, but they should be met. See, in the case of global symmetry, India's point has been that it is the voice of global south. And the global south supports that position, because as was very clear in the summit which was held in India, this Global South Summit, before we had the G20 summit. So the message from the Global South Summit in Delhi was very clear that the aspirations and the expectations of the developing countries of the Global South are for long being ignored or dealt with in a very fitful manner, on and off manner. And the kind of requirements were met with a very meager flow of assistance. Today, we need them in an optimal manner. So it should not be subcritical. Like the funding required or technological support required for moving to green energy is a crying need. And some of the countries in the global south, they face immediate palpable dangers of the temperature rise or the sea level rise. So what do we do about it? India is fully in support of the actions required and the various plans, like the G20 has several initiatives which are actually geared to this end.
Yes, Mr. Sharma, you very rightly said, if we talk about the economic partnerships, that African Union, African countries can learn a lot from India's digital public infrastructure, and in terms of the exponential growth of digital transactions, what India is witnessing right now is really exemplary. So if we talk about promoting economic partnerships and trade agreements between both India and African economies, what are the key focus areas for mutual growth? Because right now we know that Africa presents a massive untapped market for manufacturing goods such as textiles, pharmaceuticals, automobiles and light machinery. So in terms of trade agreements and partnerships, what is the future ahead?
I think sky is the limit, because the state of development challenges faced by African nations is such that you touch a field and there are areas where you can put in effort and an enterprise. The challenges also of infrastructure which are there in some of these African countries, they have to be dealt with head on, because lack of infrastructure prevents lack of investment. Like, for instance, mining, it requires rail networks, it requires access to sea or ports. All these things require a plan and execution of the plan. So what India is doing is a kind of a, comprehensive development partnership, what they call strategic partnership. But in the case of Africa, it's a kind of comprehensive development partnership, and every aspect of development is involved. When you say main areas, public health, for instance, is very important. So during COVID, we were in the front line offering vaccines and all the equipment needed, like masks, etc. And but in public health emergencies, how to deal with that, COVID has taught us. So there again, we can work with them. The Indian systems have been geared now to deal with these situations. And Prime Minister has been saying that whatever we learn and do, it is for us and for you. It is not that we are selfish in this sense, because we feel that in working together in this whole network of challenges, we gain strength.
Yeah, absolutely right, Mr. Sharma. And as we enter the concluding stage of our program, I would like to mention External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar's quote. And he was recently speaking at the 19th NAM Summit, and he said that we must be bolder in seeking our due. The more we share, collaborate and reinforce each other, the more we will change the world. So in very brief, I would like to take your view on these lines, and how do you see the gravity of this message?
It's the core of our being, it's the core of our thinking, that it is our time now. We got to assert and say, effectively and without being aggressive, but forcefully, saying that this is what we need to do, this is the path we want to choose, and other countries have to support. And this path is not very self-centered for India alone. It is for our common good. So we have this great emphasis for our common good. And Mr. Jaishankar has actually said it very, very eloquently in his statement in Kampala and also in Nigeria. His statement in Nigeria to the International Institute of Strategic Affairs, his statement is very, very clear where we want to go and what is our immediate vision. So this is a vision which India has spelled out, and I feel that this vision should be sustained by more energetic action and cooperative action, and action which is tangible, gives results which immediately mean for our people, and they are not hollow. And it is the success of the tangible gains for the peoples of India and the global south.
On that note, we conclude the program. Thank you so much, Mr. Sharma, for joining us today on Akashvani.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on cooperation between India and African countries to strengthen the global south. The participants were Sheelkant Sharma, former diplomat, and Om Vesh Upadhyay, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 928 909 4044.